the execution of that plan. It is so important for us to remain focused and delivering on that plan. If there are issues that management is facing, it is absolutely critical that we help them and unlock whatever problems that they may be facing and help them to execute on that plan. The second one is we've got planned and unplanned outages in two areas. One is Quebec 1. Second one is Quebec 1, 2, and 3. In terms of Quebec 1, which is a planned outage, which is up to this point going in a very much in line with the plan, it is important that, again, we deliver, we bring that back when it is supposed to be coming back. No delays, because it will add a significant amount of stability that this we need in this country. The second one is the Quebec 1, 2, and 3 that are unplanned outages. And up to now, we're looking at some of these coming back only about a year from now. It is important that we look at ways and means of accelerating the fixing of these power stations and of these units. And there may be things that may be required, things like exemptions. Us as the board, together, of course, with management, we need to be looking at fixing of these power stations and of these units. And there may be things that may be required, things like exemptions. Us as the board, together, of course, with management, we need to be looking and are looking at ways and means of getting those exemptions. The third area of priority for us as a board indeed is our people, the people and culture. We have got a majority of Eskom employees that are great people, that are doing exceptional work, that are so committed to this company and are also committed to the country. It is important that we continue to support them so that they can help us to execute this recovery plan. It is also important that we find ways and means of incentivizing them so that they can continue to do what is required as this country and our planned maintenance is being executed. So the people and the culture is an important agenda of the board, and this is being led by one of our board members, Dr. Von Elf. Together, of course, she's partnering with the management and led by Else Fule. The fourth area of priority for us, we cannot afford to be running out of funds for diesel throughout this period. So at any given moment in time, we as the board, together, of course, with management, are looking at ways and means of making sure that we have the funding, because running those open cycle gas turbines is important for us to be able to provide and reduce the level or the stages of load shedding. The final point I'd like to make is that the fifth priority that we have as a board with regards to load shedding are the government enablers. These enablers are so important for us to get to an environment where we are able to bring in new capacity. And negotiating and engaging with various stakeholders in the government on behalf of management is something that we are prioritizing. So with that, I would like to ask Thomas to take us through now key actions that we are taking on a day-to-day basis and update us with regards to where the system is at this time. Thank you, too. Thank you so much. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay there. I was just a bit slow in terms of getting the connection through. Good afternoon to all. Thank you for the opportunity. Dr. Nyati also referred to the specific actions being taken. Unfortunately, we've had a situation that we had to reintroduce stage 5 and also stage 6 last night. And we could have managed to get back to stage 5 for today. We've had a number of units that has also been returning over the last day, and that we're also seeing to be returning today and tomorrow. So we've got anticipating to reduce the stages of load shedding as we also approach the weekend, also with the lower demand. As indicated by Dr. Nyati, we have been working hard in terms of addressing the high levels of unavailability that we do have. Tomorrow we're returning 2 units that's been off on Tubelix, Majuba Unit 2 and the Tuka Aghan Letaba Unit 5 that's been off for Tubelix. And with that returning, it will certainly also assist in bringing megawatts back. In terms of the medium to longer term, Chair, we are driving with a lot of urgency also our outage program. We've got a number of machines on planned outage currently, and with the intention to have those units returning to service over the next couple of weeks as we also approach the winter months. That will certainly also bring capacity back and lift the EAF, which is currently very low. So a lot of focus currently going into also our planned outages in ensuring that they return on time, that they return reliably, but similar also the units that are on forced outage. Unfortunately, we're still sitting with high levels of unreliability, bringing it a component of unpredictability in terms of units breaking down. We will typically find that some days we can have 2 units being lost in that day, whereas the other day you will have 4 or 5 units being lost in that day, then creating for us difficulty in having adequate capacity. We need to continue operating our plant in terms of protecting the reserves. We therefore work on the basis that we carefully manage the diesel levels at the open cycle gas turbines. We've been dispatching them very hard earlier this week, and that then also forced our hand to increase the stages of load shedding. We need to also take care that the dam levels at the pump storage stay adequately at adequate levels in order to protect the emergency reserves. So we will continue to operate in that fashion, also dispatching diesel when required in order to keep the grid stable. So, Chair, I to then indicate that as we foreseen in for tomorrow, we will revert to stage 4 load shedding, and hopefully by Saturday to stage 3. We will then assess the situation again to see units that have returned in order to also look at the next week outlook in terms of load shedding requirements and capacity availability. Let me conclude there, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you so much, Thomas. I just want to clarify. The key outages that the board is looking at. Really, there are 2 outages that are of importance to the board that is paying their top priorities. The first one is Kubek 1, which has gone out under planned maintenance. That is the first one that we are monitoring and making sure that things are going according to plan. And the second one is the units 1, 2, and 3 in Kusile. Those are unplanned outages, and we are trying to make sure that we find ways and means of speeding up the fixing of those units so that they can be back on stream as soon as practically possible. Thank you so much, Sikonat.
Thank you, Dr. Nyati. Colleagues, Eskom has made this commitment that when we have elevated stages of load shedding, such as we do now, we would keep the country updated at all times. So there's really not much more to this briefing, rather than to bring the team to yourselves and to allow members of the media to perhaps have their inquiries or questions answered. And we have been getting quite a lot of inquiries. So this is an opportunity for all of you to please ask your questions by typing them up on the chat column. Unfortunately, it's logistically impossible again to allow everybody to speak. It presents a lot of challenges for us. So please bear with us and write all your questions. We will answer all of the questions that come through. There's only one so far, and as I have said, colleagues, we will release this recording as soon as we have downloaded it after this briefing. Please therefore do proceed and type up your questions. We will read all of them. The first and only one so far comes from Teresa Smith. My apologies. And here's Teresa's question. Considering the expiration of the agreement for cooperation peaceful uses of nuclear energy that governs the import of nuclear components from the United States, when do you think this situation will be resolved? And how much nuclear fuel does Quebec have in hand? That is, for how long could Quebec units continue functioning before it has to source more nuclear fuel again? Antoinette Slavet comes from a report. Mr. Nyati, what were you talking about when you say Eskom staff must be incentivized? And we'll take this last one from William Horn before we get responses and come back. He's from Netwerk 24. Why is a larger safety margin, that is the difference between dispatchable and demand, being maintained currently compared to last year? Is there an explicit attempt to maintain the international standard of 15% reserve margin? I guess that's what you mean there, William. Colleagues, Keith Featherstone should be in the meeting here. We did invite him. I'm just not sure if he's able to come in at this point and answer the question about Quebec. There you go. Keith is the Chief Nuclear Officer. He's no longer acting. He has been appointed in that position. Keith, please unmute yourself and respond to the nuclear fuel question. Thank you.
Afternoon, everybody. So the termination of the, well, not the termination, the expiry of the agreement between the South African government and the USA resulted in the US nuclear regulator withdrawing generic authorization that they'd given to Westinghouse to supply fuel to Quebec. So yes, that gives us a little bit of a concern. However, what we've always done at Quebec for a long time, we've actually maintained two independent fuel vendors. They are both qualified to supply fuel for us. And what we've been doing is we've been running Unit 1 on Westinghouse fuel and Unit 2 on Framatome fuel. So the fuel from Framatome is obviously not impacted by this because that comes from France, but it's the fuel from Westinghouse, which is actually manufactured in Sweden, but it comes with some components that are manufactured in the US and supplied to Sweden for them to supply to us. So that fuel is impacted. However, for the outage that we're currently in, the fuel that we need to reload when this outage is over is already on site, ready to be loaded. So for the startup now coming out of this outage, which is scheduled for early June, there's no problem with that fuel. The first time we're going to need fuel from Westinghouse, which they don't actually at the moment have authorization to ship for us, is around mid-2024. So we've got over a year for us to work with the government to sort out either establishing the agreement between the US or the USA or in South Africa, or we've got the option under the IAEA non-proliferation agreements between different countries for Westinghouse to apply for permission to supply fuel for us, sort of as a once-off each time they're supplying fuel. So yes, it's going to mean we're going to have to do some more work, but at the moment we see no risk to any of the ongoing production of Koeberg as a result of the lapsing of that agreement. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Keith, don't go, please. So please confirm briefly, one, that the fuel we need, as you have just said, I just need you to say that in as short a words as possible. It's on site and there's no concern, and it indeed was delivered by Westinghouse. And
Yes.
two, next outage, which starts in November for Unit 2. Talk about the fuel there, please.
Okay, so our normal strategy is we plan for fuel to be delivered on site 6 months before the start of an outage. So the fuel for the for Unit 2, which is the outage starts in October this year, that fuel is not yet on site, but it's scheduled for delivery around about April-May timeframe. So that fuel is not impacted. The fuel is already been ordered. It's being manufactured. But as Sekonati said, the fuel for Unit 1, which is the outage we're currently in, is already on site. So we have no issue in terms of delivery for the fuel for Unit 1.
Thank you, Keith. And that gives us 2 years really to go through the outages after this. So there's 2 years to actually put together an agreement or secure the fuel for the outages that will happen during or after 2024. Thomas Conradi, please come in and answer the question on the reserve margin. Is there a deliberate attempt to increase the safety margin? And that is a question from William, and Mteto Nyati then will come in and talk to the incentives for staff after you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sekonati. Firstly, one needs to distinguish between the immediate or real-time reserve that you need to run the system at. That is to have spare capacity available on a real time in order to be able to deal with any eventuality of loss of generating capacity and that you don't put the grid at risk. As opposed to the typical 50% margin, 15, in which you want to run your complete system at of having that spare capacity available to deal when units are off on planned maintenance or when units are when you've got forced shutdowns or forced breakdowns. Ultimately, over the longer term, that's certainly where one wants to work back towards, to have that 15% margin in terms of having more installed capacity available than what you require for your maximum demand for your country or for your grid. And that it's some time that we will take to get to that. On a real-time basis, we need to manage the actual operating reserve, and that is the reserve we require at any stage to deal with eventualities. And that's typically where, when we're doing our planning, we need to have adequate emergency capacity and reserves available in the likes of open cycle gas turbines and pump storage in the order of 2,000 megawatts. And that is what we need to keep available in order to be able to run the system efficiently and safely. Thanks, Sekonati.
Okay, on the question of incentive, what I mean here is that if you look at most companies, what they do is you differentiate based on performance. It is something that is very important. It's a tool that you give to management and the leaders of the business to be able to drive the kind of behavior that you need or that you want. By differentiation when it comes to things like salary increase and promotions. And if those tools are no longer in the hands of the leaders of the business, they are sitting outside, it becomes a problem. You treat everybody the same. we've got a number of employees in Eskom who are doing a good job. If you start to treat those in the same way as people that are not applying themselves, then you have a problem. You end up with a low morale. What we're saying here is that we need to be giving back to management the tools that they need in order for them to drive the behavior that we're looking for in this company.
Thank you, sir. Let's be specific. You are perhaps looking at the managers of the business at power station level rather than strictly at head office. Am I correct? And before you answer that, help me and my colleagues here, please. Is it correct to refer to yourself as Dr. Nyati or as Mr. Nyati?
It's correct. It's correct to refer to me as Mr. Nyati. And I'm referring generally, I'm referring across the board. You know, if employees at any levels, you start treating people the same way, regardless of how they are performing, that creates a problem. And that's what I mean. What I mean here is that we need to give back to managers of Eskom and the leaders of Eskom the tools that they need in order to differentiate based on performance.
Clear to me. I hope it is clear to you, Antoinette, and the rest of our colleagues. The next set of questions again comes from Antoinette Slavet. What is the condition of Kusile Unit 4? Do the same issues that led to the collapse at Units 1 to 3 present there? Is there a risk? Thomas, you will come and answer that question, please. Let's get to Lamiz Omarji's question. She is from News 24 Business. Can we get more clarity on when stage 4 load shedding will be implemented this evening? Lamiz, we will publish a statement shortly to confirm what Thomas has just told us. But Thomas, please repeat what you have said about load shedding going into the weekend and answer the question about whether Unit 4 of Kusile is at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, in terms of Kusile 4, Kusile 4 is, as you know, the latest commissioned unit at Kusile Power Station, and has also been still operated in conjunction with OEMs of that plant, whilst we are doing all the commissioning and all the testing on that unit. After the incident that we've had on units 1, 2, and 3, we are acutely aware of the risk, and we are closely monitoring in terms of any slurry carryover from the FGD into the stack that can cause similar risk. One must also appreciate that the failure that we've experienced on Unit 1 on Kusile was on Unit 1 we had a duct failure, but that then caused damage to Units 2 and 3's duct. And to such an extent that we had to have all 3 units being off, and the stacks of those 3 units being compromised in the process. So on Unit 4, we are closely monitoring the operating parameters to make sure that we don't have similar build-up of the slurry inside the stack, and also and if required to then take either load losses or shut down the unit if there's any need for further inspection to be done on Unit 4. But certainly we are managing it carefully. Yes, there is also risk, but we need to manage that risk carefully, that it doesn't equally materialize. In terms of the next question relating to stage 4, as you are aware, as normally we do lately the changes on the load shedding as per the plan when we're changing it early in the morning. So the intention is to continue with the stage 5 for this evening peak as right through till tomorrow morning, and that is again to afford us opportunity through the night with the lower demand to have this excess capacity available to be able to do the pumping at the pump storage schemes. That is to set ourselves up well also for the days ahead. We will then assess the situation, but currently the plan is then to revert to stage 4 in the morning if all is well. Thank you, Skunati.
Thank you, Thomas. The next question, set of questions come from Firel Hafiji. She is at Daily Maverick. To what do you attribute the high levels of unreliability and unpredictability of units across the 6 power stations? Is it age or sabotage or a lack of skills? That is a question for you, Thomas, I guess. Sume, and I suspect this is Sume Payne also from Daily Maverick. Did I understand Mr. Nyati correctly? The planned outages at the unplanned outages at Kusile 1, 2, and 3 will take a year to get back on the grid. Sume, we did last week update the country and said this will take up to a year to build the temporary stacks at Kusile to bring these 3 units online. It will be up to a year, and of course, all of this is also subject to an application for approval from the Department of Environmental Affairs to operate the station without the flue gas desulfurization. Thomas, do you want to add to that, please, and answer the question on reliability?
Thank you, Skunati. Firstly, let me deal with the question relating to high levels of reliability and unpredictability. Firstly, to say that this is a combination of a number of factors, and it's been coming over an extended period in that we've ended up in high levels of unreliability on our plant. As we've had a situation of that we've been under-investing and under-maintaining in terms of our plants for a considerable period over years, partly as a result of not having adequate funding to do the necessary maintenance, but also with the increasing shortage of capacity, not being able to always have all the units available to do the planned maintenance on. So inherently there are issues on the plant that makes the plant to be less reliable and available. Yes, there are elements of where we do have cases where lack of skill or lack of experience have caused us through human error to have trips on the plant or forced shutdowns, and that we then also rectify, and in many cases those units also then returning to the system. So there are elements, although very remotely, in terms of where we have had units being unavailable or not reliable as a result of interference to the plant, but that is much more the exception than the rule. In terms of the issues regarding Kusile 1, 2, and 3, yes, as we've indicated previously also, there are some concerns about the structural integrity of the chimney on the west side, which is units 1, 2, and 3, which houses the units 1, 2, and 3 flue ducts, and therefore it makes units 1, 2, and 3 inoperable. We are currently considering, and we are well advanced also in terms of the designs and securing contracting in order to build temporary stacks for the 3 units, whilst we can then do a thorough repair on the main chimney. We anticipate that this will take this year. We're obviously looking at what we can do to accelerate the process and to deliver quicker on the temporary stacks, but currently we foresee that this 3 units will be off for this calendar year. Thank you.
Thomas, I thank you, but you're going nowhere at this point. Terence Creamer from Engineering News wants to know, At what load factors are the OCGTs currently operating? And how much money does Eskom need for diesel for the remainder of the financial year? And how will that be funded? In other words, what is the funding deal with Treasury? The third question from, again, Terence, is when will the Kusile exemption application be submitted to DFFE? Thomas, please answer those. I believe Caleb Kasim is also in the meeting here to talk about the funding for diesel for this month and indeed March, which is the remainder of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe one of my colleagues can help in terms of the funding, but let me then deal firstly with the load factor on the OCGTs. It is varying. Let me first see that year to date we are sitting at about 14% utilization or load factor of the OCGTs. As it is now more lately, we're running the Eskom OCGTs at about 16% available load factor, and for the IPPs slightly lower in terms of that. Yes, we still dispatching the OCGTs very aggressively in order to both deal with the peaks and also when we're experiencing unforeseen losses that requires us to then introduce the OCGTs to make up that capacity. We have secured funding for what we believe is the diesel requirements for the remainder of the financial year, but maybe one of my colleagues can also respond on that then. In terms of the Kusile exemption application, we did in fact apply for exemption to the Department of Forestry, Fishery and Environmental in terms of the emission requirements and for the temporary stacks that we want to erect at Kusile for units 1, 2 and 3. So we in close discussion with the department to also fast track this. In the meantime, we're continuing, as I've indicated, with the preparatory work and designs in order to erect these temporary stacks. Thank you, Chair.
I thank you, Thomas. We've got the next set of questions from Zakele Madela Hlati. You have not identified yourself there, Zakele, about the media house. Antoinette, I've skipped deliberately your question on diesel and stage 4 because we've just dealt with that. We have used diesel sometime this week, including yesterday, but not all of the week. Hlati Madela's question is, why is it that Eskom keeps telling us about the units that break down or go on to unplanned maintenance, yet you guys never say what exactly keeps breaking down? How many of the same things that you fix get them up a few days or weeks later and it breaks down again? What really keeps breaking down every now and then? Thomas, what are the most common breakdown causes? And if you can, in what stations? Could you say about the reason those machines do break down again after being repaired? Thank you.
Thank you, Sikonati. Let me just to mention, to come back to the earlier question that you've missed now on from Ms. Slubbert regarding stage 4. We will continue using diesel to deal with the peaks. Yes, we want to limit it due to the cost thereof, but the plant is designed to be peaking plant, and we will continue to using diesel and dispatch diesel, but within means and in much lower volumes, even if we're on stage 4 or 2 or 3 irrespective. To come back into the question of...
Thomas, can I interrupt you there, please?
Yes.
For the benefit of the viewers, please turn your camera down a bit so it can lift your face up so they can see all of you. You're giving us this sinking feeling right now.
Okay, for some reason the camera is dead here on my side, so
Okay,
just check.
that's fine. Please carry on.
I will rather than shut down the camera just to not to cause confusion. In terms of the breakdowns, firstly, as I
Thomas,
indicated,
sorry, I apologize. Please do put the camera back on if you can't put your full face on it. Thank you. There you go. That's better. Thank you.
Good, thank you. In terms of the breakdowns that we're experiencing on the plant, one must appreciate that such a generating unit, not one single unit is exactly the same as the other in terms of the condition of that unit. Yes, not even the age of each of the units at a particular power station, and where it is in its maintenance intervals, and what has been the extent of maintenance on that plant. Further to that, there are a multitude of components, thousands of them in any generating unit that can potentially fail. In general, the plants are designed that you operate the plant that a single failure will not cause necessarily the unit to shut down. But as I've indicated earlier, our plants are highly unreliable currently, not all of them, but a large number of them. So we do have various levels of reliability between different plants. We do experience repeat failures, for instance, on boiler tube leaks, and it's not uncommon to have a boiler tube leak. Yes, we want to prevent them as far as possible, but they do come by, and unfortunately, there's very little discretion when you've got a boiler tube leak, in that you are forced to shut down that unit to actually do the boiler repair, the tube leak repair. Otherwise, you cause major consequential damage. We do have cases where we do have repeat work, unfortunately, where a work has been done on a plant, and then shortly thereafter we have failure of that plant again. We critically evaluate that to then establish, is it a matter of workmanship, is it a matter of quality of product or quality of spare being input, or is it a new failure mechanism or a new failure that we have not anticipated. So yes, there are a number of reasons why we do have this level of unpredictability, and also the unplanned breakdowns that we do experience. And this is what we really working hard towards, that through our planned interventions, that we can eradicate this unpredictability and have more predictable plant that will also make it much easier to operate the system and being able to get improved performance on our fleet. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. When we have a much longer briefing, I'm going to request you to give us lay people context and show us how big the unit and how many pipes are there, those cubes that they keep breaking. But let's go to Mariam Issa's question. She is from EE Business Intelligence. Can we have an assessment of what is a sustainable burn rate for the OCGTs, which have been running hard in the past week until yesterday? Dr. Nyati has pointed out how important diesel is to keep the system stable. How long do you expect the current stocks to last? Thomas, you don't have to answer the last question, but you can answer the sustainable burn rate. You have already said we have secured funding for this remainder of the year, and that's basically the next 2 months to the end of March. What is the sustainable burn rate, please?
Thank you. The plants, the OCGT plants, are actually designed and was originally constructed to be peaking plant, meaning that they're not operating for the full time at full load, but being used as peaking plant to deal with the peaks and have mid-merit operations. We're currently utilizing them quite hard, as we have indicated before. The limiting factor on is the rate at which you can also provide diesel to these open cycle gas turbines. They consume huge amounts of diesel whilst in operation. And for that, you require both the stock, the on-site and off-site stock, but also the logistics to actually bring in that that diesel to the plant. And that's where we continuously work towards having the best amount of stock and the highest levels of stock on site to maintain and secure that security of the generating capacity. But as we start to run them harder and start to operate them more in a baseload fashion, then we erode those stock levels on site, and that's when we need to then be forced to pull back on the dispatching of the OCGTs to replenish that stock. So that's what we deal with, and then there is also the supply of the stock from procuring of diesel to have available off-site stock and to transport that stock in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Kyle Cohen from News 24 has a question for you, Mr. Nyathi. Why is this briefing being hosted in the absence of the Chief Operations Officer of Eskom, Jan Oberholzer? Is he on leave? If he is not, what is the reason for him not giving the full overview? Is the Eskom board muzzling the executive management because the board is unhappy with the comments made in the past by Mr. Oberholzer? Mr. Nyathi, you're going to answer that together with Helmo Prius from Helmo is an analyst. Can you please confirm that the Van der Kloof Dam Hydro is not operating at the moment? It is operating, sir. So please answer the question on the absence of Jan Oberholzer.
Yeah, so as the Eskom board, we are not at all involved in setting up these briefings. We are merely invited to these briefings, nor do we give any direction to management as to who should be part of it or not. So one of the things that we've heard from management is that they need to have a much more sleek, to the point sessions, and they wanted to reduce the number of people that they have in these briefings. So it looked to me like they have made the decision to bring in Thomas. So there is absolutely nothing that as a board we have ever discussed with regards to what Jan said or did not say in the past. One of the things that is key within Eskom is the honesty, is the integrity, and we encourage people to say things as they are. We need to make sure that South Africans, people understand where things are, so we encourage that. So we have never had any complaint which says that Jan may have said things that are not consistent with the principles of the company. So that is unfounded. So from our side, we were invited to this meeting, and we feel we as the board are doing the role that we're asked to fulfill. Thank you, Sikonati.
Thank you, Mr. Nyathi. Yes, we didn't invite Jan into the meeting, and we were hoping to make it a very quick overview and a short briefing. So in line with the promise that we have made to bring everyone, to keep everyone informed. Now, the next question. Nyathi, I'm not reading your question again because you're repeating the question we've already asked, we've already responded to. Chris Yelland from EE Business Intelligence says Petro SA is blaming Eskom for lack of forward planning in its diesel procurement. Is this allegation valid? Debu Hokas says or wants to know, could France's Framatome supplies be ramped up to make up for the Westinghouse shortfall? He is from Public Interest South Africa. Here we've got Kyle again. How far is Eskom progressing with design and contracting a supplier for construction of the temporary exhaust stocks at Kusile for 1, 2, and the units 3? Have Eskom and the contractors at Kusile managed to secure and clean up the slurry built up inside the flues of Kusile, these 3 units, and is the structural integrity of the chimney now safeguarded? Thomas, before you come in, I'm going to ask Keith again to talk about the suppliers. We currently have 2 suppliers of nuclear fuel at Koeberg. Framatome is not impacted by the decision between the governments of the United States and South Africa. Can Framatome ramp up the volumes they supply? Do we have any other potential supplier, by the way, outside of the 2? Thank you.
So we only have the 2 qualified nuclear fuel suppliers. To qualify a nuclear fuel supply for Koeberg is a very long process. It takes quite a few years to actually get the fuel qualified, because we first have to put lead test assemblies into the reactor, verify that it's operating correctly before we can actually authorize to put in a full core of a new supplier's fuel. So yes, as I said, we've got 2 qualified fuel suppliers. So in theory, we could use either supplier's fuel on either unit, but to change in now to put Framatome fuel into unit 1, because we only replace 1/3 of the core with new fuel every outage, it would require a significant amount of studies still to be performed to verify that the mixed core, which is the Framatome and Westinghouse fuel combination, is safe and that it's good to operate for the cycle the way we plan to operate the cycle. So it can be done. There is work to be done for allowing us to do it. It's a lot simpler than bringing in a new fuel vendor. It can be done in a relatively short period of time, but we would prefer to sort out the issue and get the fuel from Westinghouse if we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Thomas, are you not able to plan your diesel consumption and therefore giving Petro SA some problems? Talk to us, please, about the work progress on returning the units at Kusile in terms of Kyle's questions.
Thank you very much, Sukunati. Firstly, to say that, as I've indicated, is that once the gas turbines start to run at base load, they consume incredible amount of diesel in a very short period. And so you can actually very quickly deplete stock levels, and then you can have quite erratic consumption of diesel if you then, when you've got more capacity available from other sources and you pull back on the OCGTs, then consume much less. So yes, it is quite varying in terms of our needs for diesel, but we're working closely with Petro SA in order to forecast and be in the best position in terms of what we're going to consume on the diesel on the OCGT. Yes, within the planning basis, that's the best we're doing currently, and we keep on working closely with them to best plan the consumption of and the use of diesel from Petro SA. And then in terms of the question relating to Kusile Power Station, the windshield, which is a chimney for the west side for units 1, 2, and 3, that's the chimney that's in question. And there's still some assessment being done. Access is difficult because of not knowing that if the structure is safe or not. And from that point of view, there's still some further analysis being done currently to understand what is the situation on the stack, and then we will start with the work to actually clean out the flues in order to then do the necessary repairs. There's also work being done in conjunction with the OEM to look at means to make sure that the stack is secured and that there's no risk of further failure on the stack. Thanks. I will pause there.
Thank you, Thomas. Jan Vermeulen of My Broadband says, NERSA cut Eskom's tariff increase application from 32% to an increase of 19%, in part by reducing the amount budgeted for diesel. What is Eskom's plan to ensure Eskom has funding for diesel? This is now for the coming financial year because the increase kicks in on the 1st of April and covers that period. We don't unfortunately have Caleb in this meeting, and I'm not able to answer that question at this point, Thomas. I don't think you should attempt to. Let's allow the finance people to deal with that. So I'll go right next to. Oh, sorry, Jan. Please do send in your question so we can ask the Treasury and Finance departments to deal with it. In this operational meeting, we are not able to. Please accept my humble apologies for that. Siphelele Dludla from IOL has got a very long quote from the presidency that is broken, is from Business Report. I'll just read the part that I can make a head and tail of. I've been trying to get a response from Eskom on this question for 2 weeks with no success. Is Eskom still implementing load reduction in certain areas, even with the heightened levels of load shedding? If so, which municipalities in Gauteng is load reduction being implemented? If not, when does Eskom envisage it will reintroduce load reduction to defaulting municipalities? Colleagues, I'm not sure if Monde Bala, the Group Executive for Distribution, is here with us in the meeting. Monde, please, can you help us with this inquiry? Thomas should not be answering this one. Spelele, I apologize. Monde is not in the meeting, so I'm going to check if we can give you a written response after the meeting. Kyle, you are back, and colleagues, I must say it's now 5 minutes before 5, and we have closed the chat to more questions. So we'll deal with what we have and close hopefully within the next 5 to 6 minutes. Kyle wants to know if we can have the following current figures: PCLF, UCLF, OCLF, and full or partial losses, and 7 PM short-fill peak. Kyle will get that in the statement that we will publish after this meeting. If you do have that right now, Thomas, please answer the question there. Thank you. Oh, for the board, let's get Mthetho Nyati to answer this question quickly. Can you give us progress update on finding a new chief executive? That's Angelo Coppola from China Global TV Network.
Yeah, the whole search of the new CEO is led by our chairman, together with the nominations committee of the board. And the search company has been hard at work, and they will be presenting to the nominations committee a long list of candidates in the next 2 weeks. So that is where we are, and that is the beginning of the process. And from that list, that's where we will end up with a short list at some point. But the process has begun in earnest. Thank you.
Before you go, Mr. Nyati, the COO as well, he reaches retirement during April, retirement age. And Chris Yelland's question is, are you looking for a replacement there, or are you trying to close dispensing with that position? That is a structural change. Thank you.
Yeah, so this has been a discussion within the board, and looking at where we are going as Eskom is strategic intent, the fact that there is going to be unbundling and the separation of the different entities, and also looking back at where we're coming from. This phenomenon of having a COO is something that is new within Eskom. So given those two considerations, it was felt that going forward, we are not going to be having a COO.
is that a decision that has already been taken by the board and has all the approvals?
No, that is the decision that is, yeah, well, it's a decision of the board that needs to, yeah, that's the board's position on this matter.
Thank you, sir. We shall move on to the next set of questions. Thomas, I don't know if you have the statistics that Kyle is asking for immediately. Have you got those at hand?
Konati, thank you very much. Yeah, surely the UCLF, PCLF, and these performance indicators are the real-time ones. The immediate ones are changing frequently as we also move on. I do have the year-to-date figures with me. If the PCLF currently sitting at an order of 10.36%, UCLF at 31.47%. The other load losses that we're experiencing is sitting at 1.6%, and then the unplanned at 17,000 currently.
Thank you, Thomas. Craig Mockel, you've got quite a long question there. Let's see if we can get through it quickly. Eskom issued an RFI for gas supply to Mkhalef in 2012 and 2013. And then the DOE/IPPO, I suppose that's the IPP office and the Department of Energy, issued an RFI for gas to power in 2014, 2015, before publishing its gas to power IPP procurement program information memorandum, including gas supply and gas to power. Andrew Durator confirmed last year in a media briefing that Mkhalef and Khorikwa have been reconfigured to burn both gas and diesel. When can it be expected that Eskom will procure gas to get more gigajoules for the same fuel budget, or otherwise reduce its fuel spend, noting that LNG is cheaper than diesel when procured on a medium-term to long-term contract and not on the spot market basis? He then goes on to say solutions do exist. The question is, when is Eskom burning gas instead of diesel? Are you able to answer that, Thomas, or shall we leave that to the board, perhaps?
Konati, thank you. Let me answer best I can with the information that I do have readily available. We can always further add to that outside of this through communication. Firstly, to say that it is still Eskom's position that we want to move from diesel to gas. In order to have it more economically than utilizing diesel to operate the open cycle gas turbines. And to that effect, we planning in this year to actually go out on a request for proposal in terms of the supply of LNG for these open cycle gas turbines. And then through time then to have the units being changed over from diesel operations towards LNG. So we still continuing with that approach. I do not have with me the facts and figures being requested by the question. We can respond with that outside. Thank you, Konati.
Thomas, thank you. Helmo also wants to know how many hours are you running the pumped storage schemes, since they were designed for peaking power only. Loiso Vagele once says many energy experts are of the view that maintenance is done at Eskom, but it is not effective, and therefore there is a need for reliability maintenance. What is Eskom's position on this, Thomas?
Thank you. Firstly, to respond on the pump storage. The pump storage schemes are actually a very versatile plant, and we can use that extensively for pumping and for generating. It's more a matter of having the capacity available to do the pumping, to have adequate water stored in the upper dam. and that ultimately determines at what rate we can dispatch the pump storage to generate power. We typically use the pump storage, yes, although the intention is more to use them for peaks, we can also use them extensively during the day, provided that one do have adequate capacity at night to pump the water up in the dam again, so that you can recover those the dam levels that you can then generate again the next day. So yes, the pump storage can be well utilized day for full days, provided that one do have adequate pumping ability at night time. Typically, we do see that we deteriorate the dam levels through the week, in that we're generating more than what we pump. And then over weekends, when we've got lower demand, we utilize that excess capacity then to aggressively pump the dams and use the pump storage less as generators, in order to recover those dams and have them well available for the next week. That's typically how we operate the pump storage. Then to just refresh my memory on the other question, I just slipped my mind now. Gunati.
Thomas, sorry, the question is, so analysts say you do maintenance on your power station.
Yes.
It is not
Good.
effective. Do you agree? And,
sorry, thank you,
what can-
Gunati. The question just slipped my mind there. Yes, certainly in terms of we continue performing, and that is what we've been doing since we started with the program also 2 years back, in terms of the reliability maintenance program. And what it entails is to make sure that we do honor our outage plans, that we do honor shutting down the units when it's due for their planned maintenance. The units, as a result of the backlog of maintenance, also the fact that we are operating our plants hard, require a lot of attention and a lot of maintenance during these interventions. We acknowledge that we are currently not getting the levels of performance that we want from our units post these outages, and we are critically also looking at, in conjunction also with the board subcommittee, we are critically looking at what we need to do differently in order to get better performance out of the outages. We doing post-outage reviews, where we assess if it's relating to scope determination that's causing the units not to perform, that the scope is inadequate, or if it's quality problems, or if it's then in the actual returning of that unit to service. What is also very important to understand, that the success or failure of this outage largely depend on the readiness of how well you have prepared in order to execute this outage prior to opening the breaker. In that regard, we have experienced problems and still having problems with outages later this year in not having adequate funding in time in order to be able to properly plan and procure for those outages. Some of the key components on these units require a 2-year lead time, requiring us to order these spares 2 years in advance. And therefore it's essential for us also to get funding available well in advance in order to procure critical spares for these outages. It is such that currently we do have the funding secured for all the outages that's currently happening, and also until about August of this year. We've also secured the funding for the long lead spares for the outages in the remainder of this calendar year and into next calendar year. We are in short of funding currently, which we are in discussion with the Chief Financial Officer also relating to outages for some of the work to be executed on outages later this year from August onwards. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Adi. Next question comes from Bulelani Zweni. Your load shedding stages are based on forecasted demand. I would like to know how far back were the forecast demands taken? And when comparing the forecasted demand with the present demand, what's the percentage error? I'm going to ask Isabel Fick, the manager in the system operator's office, to help us here with the forecasts. Isabel?
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Our forecast error is currently between 1.2 and 1.4%. It is done on a daily basis. And this is world-class performance, especially when you look at the uncertainty of renewable energy, as well as what we're seeing is changes in customer behavior, given the high stages of load shedding at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. That's Isabel Fick, General Manager in the System Operator's Office. Let me add to Isabel's response and say, in addition to the forecasts, as well as all the statements that we do declaring what level of load shedding will be, those are all forecasts in terms of the demand. Then in the evenings, Eskom follows up and releases the actual statistics of production that particular evening at a particular point during the peak. So do keep an eye on your Twitter pages to see the exact amount of production or amount of power available, as well as the amount of load shedding. Chris Yelland wants to know, I guess that's a question for you, Keith, which you need not answer because I think I can. Why was the Westinghouse nuclear fuel supply license to South Africa allowed to expire? Was this due to negligence or slip up, for example, by Eskom? Chris, the short answer to that question is this is a government-to-government agreement between the Republic of South Africa and the United States, not between Eskom and any company. Because of the expiry of that intergovernmental agreement on nuclear cooperation at government level, let's repeat that, Kubeck, as Keith explained earlier, is therefore unable to supply nuclear fuel to South Africa. It would need exemptions currently. Keith, if there's anything you wish to add there, please do come in. Otherwise, I will move on to the next question. Right.
I've got nothing extra to add.
Thank you, sir. So the question, Chris, then needs to be directed to both the governments of the United States and the South African government as to why these agreements were allowed to expire. I'm going to David Lipschitz. I apologize, David, if I butchered your name. If the OCGTs are running at higher than expected or designed load factors, will they need more maintenance or fail or need to be replaced quicker than expected? And the same question regarding the city of Cape Town running Steenbras much more than designed to help reduce 1 to 2 stages of load shedding in Cape Town. Is this going to increase costs in time? Thomas, you are running your OCGTs hard. Does that mean you need to replace them sooner or do more maintenance on them?
Thank you for the question. Firstly, the gas turbines can run base load, so it's not that they can't run. So in running them higher load factors, not damaging, but the maintenance intervals of these gas turbines are dependent on running hours. So you will require to do more frequent maintenance, the higher load factors that you do operate them. And that is not uncommon for any of these type of plants. So certainly we take that into consideration also in doing the planned maintenance intervals on the gas turbines. But there's no indication, and that's certainly not the way in that one will cause premature life exhaustion of these plants by running them at higher load factors. It's a matter of upping the maintenance intervals and ensuring that one's maintenance philosophy is adjusted towards the higher load factors. Then in terms of, yeah, I think I think I've dealt adequately with that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Kyle, we have also dealt adequately with the question of diesel. Thomas did confirm earlier that we have secured the requisite amount of diesel for the remainder of this month and the next month, which is the remainder of the financial year 2023, which ends on the 31st of March. I see that Terence Kramer is also pressing on the question of diesel. Terence, I did say we don't have, unfortunately, Caleb in the meeting. Again, like he was not invited and he's busy with another engagement. But we have previously sent this question to another media house on exactly the same thing, and I'm going to read it out for you. Eskom Treasury is exploring funding alternatives for incremental diesel spend with additional funding likely to be available in February. So I think this has been overtaken by the events where Thomas has confirmed that he has got the amount of diesel that he needs for the next 2 months. Of course, we will then, the Eskom Treasury is again fully aware of the higher need for diesel burn during the financial year 2024, as we do now. So they have to, they will respond to that in due course should the need arise. I hope that is in order. I'll go back to Bulelani Zweni. Bulelani has not identified himself. I've not come across the name before. Talking about lack of skilled employees in power stations, what is Eskom doing to get the skilled employees in the power stations? And most importantly, how is Eskom planning to get the vast employees that are currently working on coastal provinces to where the work is needed at Medupi and Kusile? Bulelani, Eskom did make an announcement during October last year about a crowdsourcing initiative where we are trying to bring back all the specialist skills that we may get, particularly from people that used to work for Eskom in the past. Thomas, do you have anything you can add to the question, particularly on the allegation that we have employees sitting in the coastal provinces where you don't need them?
Yeah, I will not voice an opinion in terms of the coastal provinces. That's certainly the opinion of Mr. Zweni in terms of that there are a vast number of our employees in the coastal provinces. Yes, it is a fact that a number of our power stations are in remote areas, and hence also that we need to provide a work environment that is conducive for people and to be attracting people also to those power stations. We've got adequate resources at Medupi and Kusile, so there's no shortage of resources. We're continuously looking at our resource allocation to the different sites, also in terms of skills that is required, and where we need to contract in specific skill or specific knowledge, we do that also. We are making also use of contracted staff through contractors, both in terms of contracting on individual basis, but also through some of the OEMs and other service providers. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Colleagues, it seems there is a certain bug in the system which sends questions to all of us on behalf of people who didn't send them. One such person is Clyde Mellinson. The question that you have already answered, Thomas, about gas, he denies asking that question, and there are quite a few other people, including from my broadband. So I hope we're not dealing with ghost MS Teams stuff here. I do apologize if anyone has been affected negatively in that way. We are getting very close to the end, colleagues. Loiso Vagele wants to know, how will the state of energy disaster that is proposed currently help Eskom alleviate load shedding in the immediate term? Loiso, there is no state of emergency yet, and we will allow the government and to proceed with its business. And it obviously will include detail there that does affect Eskom, and when Eskom has studied that, it will be able to answer your question. Peter Bruce of Business Day wants to know, why was the facility intended to house used generation equipment at Quebec not completed by the time French engineers arrived to install new equipment? What is the current state of construction of this building, and who is the contractor? That is also, it's not yet the last question. Keith, you dealt with this during the outage of Unit 2 of Quebec. Please, can you help Peter Bruce with
Peter's question has got relevance. It has taken us a while to get the operational license from the National Nuclear Regulator, but we've got the license to use the buildings. Both buildings are complete. We've got the license to use the building for taking the steam generators out from Unit 1. So there's no potential delay. The buildings are complete and we're good to go.
The last part is, who is the contractor, please? Or who built those?
Oh, sorry. They were built by Eskom Rotec Industries.
Thank you, Keith. Chris Yelan, please can you advise why the data files on OCGT load factors cannot be downloaded and viewed properly from the Eskom data portal, despite my reporting this to Eskom 2 weeks ago? Mr. Conradi mentions the year-to-date load factor of Eskom's OCGTs as 14%, but the year-to-date load factor of the Eskom OCGTs is shown as 16% plus on the data portal. Please confirm, Thomas.
Thank you. We will certainly follow up on why there's a problem with the download of the information. I was not aware of that. In terms of the 14% versus the 16%, when we reflect the 14%, that includes Acacia and Port Rex, which are very small OCGT plants, which we normally use very little. So that gives them a lower percentage, whereas the 16% plus is slightly higher because it's on the main OCGTs at Ankerlig and Gourikwa. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. I'm going to read these last questions, all of them at once, and invite you colleagues to respond. Tebogo Kas of Public Interest SA says it is surely outlandish pronouncements by the African National Congress officials that load shedding will be history by December, and this puts Eskom officials under undue pressure. Is the board engaging with the minister to address this undue pressure on Eskom? Mr. Nyati will answer that. Eskom has definitely said what it would take to end load shedding, and that is additional capacity. Peter Atat Montalto also talks about pressure from the ANC and government on the board Exco to not apply the 18.65% tariff increase. Have the board made a decision whether to apply the increase or not? If not, when? Peter, that question can honestly be answered without even the board getting involved. It is only NERSA, the regulator, an institution that sets electricity prices, and it is only that authority that has the power to decide what the electricity prices are, following a very hectic public participation process in which Eskom makes an application and goes to defend the application, and members of the public get invited, and NERSA makes a decision. Eskom has already released a statement to this effect and said, correctly so, that the only authority that can determine the price of electricity is NERSA, and anyone that wishes to see a different price needs to challenge the NERSA determination in court, to set it aside and to review it. Mr. Nyati, please will you answer the question? Do you talk to the government ministers about the pressure that they put on Eskom's officials to end load shedding by December?
Thank you, Konati and Debo, for that question. You know, as the board, management, and also the employees of Eskom, the only pressure that we have is the pressure coming really from the people of South Africa who want us to improve the current situation. As the board, we've never really had any pressure from other people or from government to change our plans. We have very, very capable board members, many of them being part of the Business Operation Performance Committee, who are technical, who have been working together with very capable people in the management side, led by Thomas, who have come up with the plan that we have tabled for South Africa, which is the 2-year plan. And that is the plan that we are working on. That is the plan that we've communicated to all of the stakeholders, including government. But we are also, as this team, we're open to any ideas. Maybe there are things that we may not have seen. If there are those ideas that help us to move the timeline to earlier, that's what we all want. So if there are workable ideas like that, we will certainly implement those ideas. But at this time, we have a clear plan, worked together with management. That is a 2-year plan. That is what we are working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nyati. Colleagues, I thank you all, particularly you members of the media that responded to this invitation at very short notice. I thank you for your attendance and for all your questions indeed. As I did say initially, we will share this recording as soon as we can download it. And secondly, we will share a power alert confirming the stages of load shedding going through tomorrow and all the way to Saturday and Sunday. Thank you very much for your attendance and for your questions. Have a good evening.
And we are live.